how does fasting work? How
Yes.
is it? How does it fit into different people's lifestyles? When should you start? Does it matter your sex? Does it matter if you work out? These kind of things. I think most people they don't want just one size fits all because they know that
Right.
fasting isn't for everybody and it's different for everybody to be
Right.
effective.
Okay, great. Okay, so I've already sort of reminded everybody about what we're talking about today, and that we're going to try and focus the next 20 to 30 minutes on just fasting, and there are questions specifically about fasting. I know that there are questions about everything else that you talk about, um, Edamen and all the things, but we're really going to try and focus on fasting today so that we can give you guys a handful of takeaways that you can leave this with, and then I have a little surprise for you guys at the end, but I'll wait to the end to show you guys. So do you why don't you start, because obviously you're the expert here. I will address some things about fasting and female health and fertility, but we can get to that, towards the latter half.
Great. Well, it's great to be back on. Hi, everyone.
Yay.
Thanks for joining. It's nice to see you. And so today we're going to have a pretty quick session about fasting. You and I have been talking about fasting for a long time. We talk about it a lot, and we have some different views. I'm a male. Sometimes I work out. We're different ages, and so really the question I think we should talk about is how does fasting work? How
Yes.
is it? How does it fit into different people's lifestyles? When should you start? Does it matter your sex? Does it matter if you work out? These kind of things. I think most people they don't want just one size fits all because they know that
Right.
fasting isn't for everybody and it's different for everybody to be
Right.
effective.
And actually, I'd like to really emphasize that because some people don't actually know that. So, and that's definitely what we're here to sort of highlight, that it isn't one size fit all. To keep that in mind.
Well, yeah. So I started skipping meals when I was in my 20s, actually, and so
Mm-hmm.
often I'm asked when should people start, and the answer I think is well, in your 20s, actually, you can start not eating three full meals a day, especially if you are a nice, healthy weight. We're not talking about, of course, today, we're not talking about malnutrition or starvation. That's very important to make that point. But what I've liked to do in my whole life is to gradually reduce um, not just how much I eat, because I'm actually slowing down on my metabolism. I'm now 53 as of a couple of days ago. But I also think it's important to gradually increase the period where you don't eat and shorten the period where you do eat. And that's what
Agreed.
I would like to cover today.
Yeah, agreed. We're on the same page with that.
Mhm. Yeah, so I started my life in my 20s doing a lot of exercise. I was working out at the gym. I needed a lot of energy, so I was eating um, regular 3 meals a day. And then I decided, well, I'm not hungry in the morning, so let me just skip breakfast and see what happens and put my calories into the later part of the day. And that worked really well for me. I didn't have this morning brain fog, and I could power through the day. I could learn my lectures or not fall asleep during lectures in college. And so I've done that most of my life. I rarely eat a big breakfast or breakfast at all. And I think that's a good way to start. If you're young and you're considering trying to reduce the window of when you eat, you could either eat later in the day, so start eating an early lunch or a lunch only, and then or if you don't like to skip breakfast, you can actually skip dinner or at least reduce how late you eat. But what you want to do, and Serena, we talk about this a lot, is so if it's a clock, you want to have an extended period that includes sleep, because sleep is the easiest time to fast by far. So
Mm-hmm.
either try to extend the time in the morning when you don't eat, or at night before you go to bed.
No, I absolutely agree. And, there are a few other factors that I factor into it as well. And something I've chatted about with a colleague of mine who's, the sleep doctor. But sometimes, the time of the day that you're born can affect your personal circadian rhythm. Obviously, there is a circadian rhythm that we go by because of, the sun. Um, but it's really about the window that you eat and the window that you fast. And so for different people, it's different things. As you said, for some people, it's easier if you skip breakfast. For some people, it's easier if you skip dinner. It depends on the hours that you allow your body to just digest and rest and be in a state where it's not in abundance, as you always talk about, David, where it feels like it's in lack. And for those people who are jumping on for the first time who don't really know why we would fast at all, maybe you can give like 2 or 3 sentences of why fasting is good for you, why it's great for longevity, what is happening with your body, in your body when you're fasting.
Yeah. Well, it's been known for thousands of years that societies who have a fasting period are more disease resistant and healthier in the long run. So it's a tradition. But science over the last 70 years has shown that reducing not just the number of calories, but actually when you eat is super important for longevity. And in rodent studies, where most of these studies have been done, and a few in monkeys and a few in humans, but the rodent studies are very clear. These are the conclusions, that if you restrict the time period during the day which you give an animal to when they can eat, it has a huge impact on their health and their longevity. If you say, okay, let's take the same number of calories and spread it out throughout the entire waking day, or for a mouse, a waking night, it doesn't work as well. You get a little bit of health if you reduce calories, but it's more important when you eat. And it's also, of course, it's important what you eat. You can't just eat terrible food and expect to get away with it. But there was an amazing study done by a friend of mine down at the National Institutes of Health, Rafa Decabo, and he thought that he could find the optimal diet for a mouse, and he put in different quantities of protein and carbohydrates and fats. And after studying over 10,000 mice, found that it really didn't matter what they ate so much. They were all healthy, relatively healthy diets, but the combination of ingredients didn't matter. It was actually when they ate, and it was ate during the day, and it was the 1 hour window that they got, that these mice lived a whopping 35%, which is imagine we could do that. And so that and other studies looking at the amount of calories and when the mice eat typically has told us that very likely we're eating too often. And that's why we fast. We believe that when we're in a state of adversity, or at least perceived adversity, our bodies turn on protective genes. They turn on the sirtuin genes that we've worked on for 20 something years. And there are other genes such as mTOR gets downregulated, AMPK gets upregulated. And these are longevity genes that protect the body. We know this from many, many studies over the years in animals and in humans, that there are longevity genes that protect us. And if we sit around and we're always full, or at least we're snacking on bars during the day, and we're not moving, our bodies say, that's great. We don't need to worry. We can exhaust our bodies early. Our reproductive systems will actually age more prematurely. Someone raised the question about fertility, and I know you'll talk about it later, Serena. The one study that was fascinating was that mice that didn't that restricted their feeding, the females actually, even though their fertility was not as abundant, they did extend the period at which they were fertile. So it does seem like there's this trade-off between calories, longevity, and fertility, which we'll get into more later. But really, what I'm saying is you just want to make your body have a little bit of a threat to survival, so it fights against aging.
Yeah, and so for anyone who's new to our chats, when Dr. St. Clair says adversity and threat, what he's saying is when we're not putting food into our bodies, when we're restricting that kind of food intake, our bodies feel like it's in lack, and it's in adversity. So that's for anyone who's new to our type of chats. That's what he's referring to, and that's why it's good for longevity. In addition to that.
I was just going to add that it's similar to the effects of exercise and cold therapy and hot, and sauna. these are all the types of adversity that we're learning puts the body into a defensive state that fights disease.
Yeah, and again, for any newbies out there, it also means like when we're stressing our bodies out, when it's sort of perceived stress, like how cold plunge can feel like awful, when you're in
Yeah.
it until you're out of it, or the type of exercise that seems like we're really taxing our bodies. And of course, when we're fasting and we may feel like we're starving ourselves, it's that stress and that sense of adversity that we're giving our bodies. Alongside that, we're also allowing our bodies to kind of heal, giving it a break to to kind of rest, recover, detox, which supports other benefits. It supports gut health, it supports brain health, it supports our immunity, all which lead to longevity and lifespan. So now that there's a little bit of background for people who maybe don't know what we're talking about today and just happen to jump on. Let's talk a little bit about the windows. Don't have my messages here, but just what feels good, what 12 and 12 mean, what 16 and 8 mean. I know that you've also talked about 20 and 4 even. And so if there are differences on average, and I know we said it's individualistic, but just to give some people some insight so that they can figure out what works for them and how to figure out what works for them.
Mm-hmm. Right. So if you hear these numbers that Serena just mentioned, they're talking about the window of eating. So, for instance, the 16-hour window you'll hear people talk about, that typically means you want to skip, or you're skipping breakfast and having a late lunch, which is what a lot of people can do. If you go further, you could do 18 hours a day, and some people go to 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
And then you just, 4 hours is still, one meal. And it's also called OMAD, is one meal a day. But importantly, I always want to put with adequate nutrition.
So if it's confusing to anyone, the larger number is the number as the larger number applies to the hours that you're not eating. So 16 would be the hours that you're not eating, and then 8 would be the hours that you can eat. Yeah, and so that's what we're referring to when we're talking about the numbers. And yeah, Dr. Sinclair was talking about one meal a day. We differ just slightly there because I'm really more about eating within that window, and it can all come in one meal, as David said, if you get a nutritionally dense meal. And if you can't get it all in one meal, it's okay to have more than one meal, just as long as within the eating window of 8 hours or 6 hours or 4 hours, whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah. You also want to match your feeding to your circadian rhythms. It turns out
Yes.
these longevity genes that we work on, the sirtuins, they actually control the clock. And if you've ever heard me talk about NAD, this molecule that is essential for life and longevity, it also goes up and down with the day. And what you eat controls your NAD levels. And if you start to eat fairly irregularly, let's say one day you have breakfast, the other day you skip breakfast, and then you eat a big dinner, and the next day you skip dinner, it'll make it's not as good as being consistent, actually, because what's going to happen is that your sleep wake cycle and your NAD cycle is going to get out of whack, and you might even feel jet lagged. um,
Mm-hmm.
so that's an important thing. And there was actually a study in mice that if they fed the mice in periods when they would not normally eat, let's say they only gave them some food when they were asleep and made them go and get that food, they didn't live longer. So timing of this is very important. So I try
Yes.
most days to match it. And so I like to eat most of my calories, if I can, around dinner time. Try not to go too late if possible, and then fast through the night and have very small amounts of food up until then, if possible. Oh, and
Mm-hmm.
Serena, I just want to mention, if possible, because I'm not perfect at this. You've seen me eat before. I typically have a little bit of yogurt in the morning because I have polyphenols that are insoluble, and I mix that. So it's okay to have a few bits of calories. You can have a coffee with a bit of milk. This is not going to break a fast terribly, and your body will still, I believe, and the results say from the lab that you'll still get the benefits. But often when you're starting these, how about we talk about how difficult this is and how to make it easier?
Yeah, that's great. To kind of segue there, For people who, for those of you who are just used to having breakfast every single day, that's sort of how you were brought up, how you're raised, what you know is kind of part of your rituals and how you go about your day. I think an easier way to start would be try for 12 hours, and as David said, include your sleep time. So if you're sleeping for 8 hours or 6 hours or 7 hours, all you have to do is bookend it. So that means starting your fast, plus plus or minus 1 or 2 or 3 hours before you go to bed, and then adding on those other hours plus or minus on the other end of sleeping. So again, if you sleep for 8 hours and you want to try fasting for 12, then that means you just stop eating for 2 hours before that sleep period of 8 hours, and then you add in 2 hours when you wake up where you don't eat, and then really that's 12 hours, and you really only make an effort for
Yeah.
those hours, and then it becomes easier to just add another hour and just add another hour. And if you do
Yeah.
it on the bookends, it's much easier and it doesn't seem as stressful or as a strain. So
Yeah.
I would say
I
that
love these
that's an
conversations.
easy way to do it.
Yeah. As Stephanie said, it's easier than she thought. So it really can be easier than it
Mm-hmm.
sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Just to answer a couple of questions that have come up, I do occasionally have drinks in the morning. Athletic greens is one. I've checked my blood glucose levels; they don't go up at all when I drink it. So for me, I'm getting the vitamins, and it's very low glycemic index. Someone asked me, "What about a 72-hour fast?" Ross asked about it. 72-hour fasts are often done by people who really want to get a deep cleanse. 72 hours is when deep autophagy or recycling of proteins, it's called, kicks in. I've never actually been able to do that. I can only go for a day, if
Uh-huh.
that. But
Okay.
there are some people who can do 72 hours. And I think that if you do that, I would say every couple of weeks, or maybe a month is more reasonable. That would be
Uh,
great biologically to be able to clear out the body.
Yeah, and we can actually talk a little bit more about that if you guys have an interest. There are 24-hour fast, 72-hour fast, 5 days, 7 days. Some people have done 10 and 30 days. There are different ways to do fast like that, um, and different ways to support your body when you are doing fast like that. And so I'd want to dive into that properly so that you guys have the tools and the information to support you. But yes, there are obviously benefits. So as long as you do it the right way.
And
Um,
and 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 water and liquids are super important in any
yeah, you
fast,
have to
correct?
stay super hydrated. Uh,
Yeah.
so yes. Okay, so covered that. I know that some people about women's health. I know we're kind of coming up on time, so I did want to address some of that about women's health and how to fast. And as David brought up earlier, it's different for women and men. So how a man can fast is definitely different than how a woman can, and he also brought up how it can affect fertility. So, as females, we require different nutrients at different times of the day, different times of the month, and it does have to do with our hormones. And we kind of have to modify this throughout our lifespan through the different chapters. So, as people move into menopause, premenopause, so cycling is sort of the best way in terms of fasting for women. So the first and second weeks of your cycle, you do want to do some sort of fasting. Um, and that's sort of your bleed week and bleed after and the week after, for lack of a better term. Sorry, to our male audience. But during these times, we're much more resilient to carbohydrate restriction. So you want to be eating foods that are more for estrogen metabolism during that time, and you want to prioritize those type of carbohydrates in the form of fiber-rich foods. We've talked about that before, and we have content on that, and we can dive into more detail if you want on another time. But that's sort of what you should keep in mind when you are fasting, and what you're eating during the fast. And in your second week, your anabolic hormones, they go up, which is your estrogen and your testosterone. And so you need to increase your protein intake a little bit. And that can come in the form of animal protein or in plant protein, but just to be more mindful of that. And then in your third and fourth week, which is your ovulation week, your luteal week, your body is in sort of a different hormonal environment. And so you want to kind of focus more on resistant starches. And when you're fasting, to keep those things in mind. You can't be as aggressive. We can't be like the boys, unfortunately, because if we're a little bit too aggressive, we fast for too long of a period of time, we keep our body in ketosis, we can actually produce more reverse T3. And that's not what we want to do. You can even make yourself insulin resistant. So as females, we just have to be more mindful and be a little bit more gentle when we, during the different weeks of the month, in our ovulation, in our cycles. So that's what I would say. And it's not a blanket for everyone. It's just to keep those things in mind and to support yourself while you're fasting with those type of foods. And I think we're coming up close to time. So I know there's a lot more fasting for vegan women. I'm vegan. I fast. I do this intermittent fasting that we're talking about. I try to pretty much do it every single day. Some days I fall off. That's okay. But it's pretty much a daily thing. Minimum of 12. I target 16, and that happens most days of the week. And just to make sure that I get in those foods during specific weeks of the month.
I was just called a beast. I'm not sure if that's a compliment or not, but thank you anyway. Just a few things I've seen come up. I'll quickly address for lack of time. NMN, I take it in the morning. I don't take it at night because you want your NAD levels to go up in the morning. Otherwise, you'll probably feel jet lag. I take it with water. You don't need food with that. I'm currently taking a gram, half a gram a day. I've reduced it recently, but I used to take a gram a day. Resveratrol, I still take that in the morning with my NMN in the yogurt because that gives me my boost, that gives me the energy and matches the circadian rhythms. So yeah, this is I think unfortunately we're running out of time, Serena. We could keep going for another few hours.
I know, I think we'll have to wrap it up. I know that there's been a lot of comments just about how much we can kind of get into a chat, and sometimes we don't answer all your questions. The most helpful thing is to either send messages. You can send it to the community app. You can send it to direct messages and just flag that these are questions that you'd like to have answered in the lives. Actually, the best thing you can do is when we share that we are doing a live, usually on stories or on a post, drop your questions there, and then that's really the ones that we're going to pull from. It's sort of the easiest for us, and that way we can address questions and prepare for them, because we do spend time and energy and love preparing for these for you guys. So we want to serve you guys in the best way possible. So that's it. Time does fly. We're at 30 minutes, and so we're going to wrap it up, but we are going to do more of these. Yes, we will save this for later. As always, we edit, we clean up, and we reshare and we repost. And we still have our link up if you guys want to sign up for our series, basically, and get the notes from our chats.
And there's a burning question, I think, that I raised that somebody posted. Why would I reduce my NMN levels? Oh, no, is Gizmo okay? And so the answer to that is I'm trying different things. I want to see what might work, and I want to see if lower levels will make any difference. It's an experiment, and we'll see how things go.
Okay, great. All right. Thanks so much, David. Thank you, guys. And thank you for all the thank yous that I see here. And we'll see you guys next time. All right.
Thanks,
bye.
Serena. Bye, everyone.